Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got a buddy over here. Buddy, we go way back. What, 5 minutes? But yeah, exactly. So Tommy Spaulding. Tommy, how you doing today?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So I feel like we would know each other just because we have a mutual friend, Matthew Kelly. What about that guy?
One of the best guys in the world.
Yeah. You can listen to him in his Australian accent talk all day and hear him talk about dreams and all the stuff that he's doing. But we could have a podcast just on Matthew, I'm sure, but the guy is phenomenal. But We're here to talk about Tommy Spaulding, and you're on the show, so thanks for being with us. So like every show, Tommy, I always go back and kind of decide what's help you become the man you are today. Kind of what's the Tommy Spaulding backstory, if you will.
Yeah. Well, obstacles and struggles. I graduated high school literally probably the bottom of my class with a 2.0 GPA. I tell people I graduated a 4.0 if you took my GPA and he added to my college GPA.
That's right.
Just really struggled academically. And so life wasn't easy, growing up in high school in upstate New York and struggling with dyslexia. And then I joined a group called Up With People right out of high school at 17 because no college would accept me with my terrible grades and GPA. And I traveled all over the world with this international leadership program at 17. And that 1 year turned into 9 years traveling to 83 countries. And 25 years later, I became CEO of that organization. And so much of my message and who I am today is this upstate New York dyslexic kid that never been on an airplane before, never traveled outside of really New England, got to travel literally all over the world and live in Asia for 4 years and Australia for 2 years and Europe for 4 years and got to really see and love and serve the world through this organization. So
that's amazing.
A lot of blessings to them.
Yeah. And you were the youngest CEO of that organization, correct?
I became CEO when I was 35 years old. And that was a very humbling experience.
Yeah. So 17, so never did the traditional college type thing, correct?
I did. I finally I finally did go to college. I went to a school called East Carolina University.
Oh yeah, that's right. I saw that. You were the outstanding alumni of the year a couple years ago.
Which is ironic because I also graduated with a 2.0.
That's right. Hey, that's all right, man. Look what you're doing now, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So what was your upbringing like? Mom, dad, all that kind of stuff. What do you think you learned in that and from that deal?
Humility. My mom stayed home. She never graduated college until after we graduated high school. She went to college, became a teacher. My dad was a public school teacher. My grandparents were hairdressers from Italy. So I grew up very, just humble. And all my aunts and uncles and, cousins all became school teachers. And, I wanted to become a teacher. I just couldn't become one because I couldn't pass the test to become a teacher.
Isn't that amazing?
To read and my dyslexia. So I fell into a different, line of work. And now I teach, but not, in the classroom. I teach the world about servant leadership and authentic relationships, books and stuff.
Amazing. I'm going to edit this part out, but can you step back just a little bit? I want to make sure your head, there you go. There. Perfect. And we'll make sure they see all your face. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's a lot of learning. And obviously we could talk about that stuff for a long, long time. But when you studied leaders and all over the world, so you're getting the best of the best and learning from them. And what are you finding? I know it's probably a tough question, but what are you finding that maybe the one or two or three things that you find consistently happening with leaders at the top of their game?
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid and I found out Santa Claus wasn't true. It broke my heart because I was late bloomers that just believed in when I was like still. And the analogy is when I started becoming on the speaking circuit and started meeting incredible leaders and starting to coach and consult and train on leadership. You meet most of the Fortune 500 CEOs and you become friends with a lot of them. And a lot of it was like meeting Santa Claus and finding out he wasn't true. Meaning when I met these leaders, a lot of them weren't humble and a lot of them were genuine. A lot of them were narcissists. A lot of them were totally successful and their people hated them. And it broke my heart actually because I leadership. And then you meet these amazing leaders and they're all about themselves. And it's the same in my profession. You mentioned John O'Leary and Matthew Kelly. These guys are like me. They write books and they speak. They're the real deal. Yep. But I can name, and I would never do this, but I can name 50 authors that are just terrible human beings. They're all about themselves. And so it kind of breaks your heart a little bit.
Yep.
Because there's a reality that the more success in life we get, the more arrogant we become. And heart-led leaders don't believe that. They believe that the more success you get in life, the more humble you become. But to answer your question, Brett, the one trait that I feel that the great leaders, the really ones that have significant impact with their organizations, is that the more success, the more positional authority they have, the more influence they have, is the more humility they have.
Yeah.
That's just a beautiful quality when you could be kick-ass, successful, top of the food chain, and then you're deeply humbling and you're serving other people.
Right.
It's really hard to do,
Yeah.
but when you do it well, there's nothing you can't achieve.
Yeah. And don't you think too, the deeper conversations with those people too? I mean, like, and I say with those people, like with anybody, whether they're, the second in command or the bottom of the totem pole, that's a big feeling, right? To be able to be that heart-led leader, that you're able to have conversations with those people, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
We were just at our firm's Christmas party on Friday, and I had a conversation, we're nameless, but of a previous life. And they were talking about that, just how different it feels at our firm, and the values of the conversations that they're able to have now is completely different, right? You get caught up in some of that stuff. So I'm glad to hear that. I didn't think that was the route you were going to go, but I'm glad you did, because I think that's important, especially the ones like you're saying. These are the ones at the huge corporations. And what are their personal relationships like? Do you know? I mean, obviously you said their cultures may not like them, but what about their personal relationships? Are they pretty much the same way?
Exactly the same way. The way you treat your wife and your children are the same way you treat your executive assistant.
Yeah.
And you can't compartmentalize the way you treat people. And I love when you say, if you want to really get to know someone, watch how they treat the waitress, or the Uber driver, or the attendant, or the bank teller. And when you're around people, as an author, all I do is watch and observe.
Yep.
I love watching successful people and how they treat and behave in public and private settings. And you're often the same.
Yeah. So I know you're an author. You've got your 2 books. You've got it's not just who you know, and the other one is about heart-led leader. 2 totally different things, right? One's about servant leadership. One's about the authentic relationship. So talk to us, because in our world, in our firm, we do talk with our clients about that authentic relationship, and there's no transaction. And I think you said that earlier before we were recording. It's not about having a transactional relationship. It's about having a real relationship. So talk to us about that from your first book. Again, it's not just who you know.
Yeah. I read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, years ago. And, so many people think it's the pillar book on networking. And I just grew up with, I'm one of those anti-networking people. And it doesn't mean I'm socially awkward. I love people. But if you define the word networking, Brett, what does it really mean? You meet people to help who?
Yourself.
And if you live a life where you're always meeting people to help yourself, you're living a very selfish life.
Yeah.
And the most successful leaders and the successful people and salespeople, whatever, and I've met, embrace the 4 words of leadership that I always talk about. It's not about you. When you can live a life where it's not about you, it's about serving others. But every relationship that you build, if you're networking, meeting people to help you, what if you change networking into what I call net giving, where you're still meeting people, but instead of saying, how can I meet people to help me? How can I meet people to help them? So when you live a life about helping others, it's called net giving, not networking. Networking is all about yourself, about being selfish. But when you build a business of net giving, where you're truly giving to your clients and your people, you'll have an unprecedented business results. And so the book I wrote, it's not just who you know. It's not who you know. It's how deeply you know people. And when you can know people in a deep, meaningful, authentic, genuine way, and not be so transactional, and not have relationships so you can get something from somebody, that you'll have unprecedented business results. So the book is really about the 5 floors of relationships. And floor 1 is transactional, and floor 5 is a lifelong client that would never leave you because they know you love them.
Yep. I laugh because we call our CFLs clients for life.
Yeah,
I love. You have to look at that, your CFL, and know that's a client for life. You make different decisions today when it's about an authentic relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Versus that transaction. Oh, I got paid. Let's move on to the next one. No, that's not what it's about. Right? Let's keep these clients for life.
if you really interview every salesperson or every person in the world, none of them would say, I really crave disingenuine transaction relationships.
Right.
No one craves that. But when you only have 24 hours in a day and you got a wife and husband and kids and job and work and 1,000 things, you forget to build the meaningful relationship and you just move to the transaction. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? And the book is really about how do you slow down and build a life and a business where relationships really matter. And the goal in life is not to get on someone's Christmas card list. The goal in life is to get invited to their house to celebrate Christmas dinner. And really to build relationships that are so real that people will do anything for you because they know you love them.
Yeah. That's that 2 a.m. list, right? You hear people talk about that. Who can you call and literally would get out of bed and come do something for you at 2 a.m. And hopefully I'm not up at 2 a.m. That's too late. But anyway, you know what I mean. So talk about your other one, Heart-Led Leadership. Both these books, by the way, are #1 bestsellers on all the big, bestseller lists. You can get them at Barnes & Nobles. You can get them at Amazon, everywhere like that. But talk to us about that second one.
Yeah, the second book, The Heart-Led Leader, was really about servant leadership. And it was really about love in the workplace. And there's so many books on servant leadership. And that's not a new concept. It's been around for a long time. But I wanted to write a book that connected servant leadership with bottom line results. Because often servant leadership kind of gets poo-pooed as a good touchy-feely, good thing. But does it really help the bottom line? And so I spent 3 or 4 years researching companies and organizations around the world that had unprecedented culture and results, financial results, because they had an operating system of servant leadership. And some people call it servant leadership and some people call it love. I call it heart-led leadership. Like, how do you truly lead with your heart? And for 200 years, we've been brainwashed, Brett, that we were supposed to take our minds to work, our heads to work, and leave our hearts where? Home. Our hearts for our wives, our husbands, our children. But the greatest leaders connect the head and the heart. And the whole book is called The Journey of 18 Inches. And that's the journey between your brain and your heart. Between our 18 inches. And for years, we took our heads to work. We were strategic, analytical, thinkers, visionaries. We led from our heads. But the great leaders in the world today, the great coaches, the great teachers, the great leaders connect the head and the heart, and they lead from this heart. And they lead with qualities like authenticity and vulnerability and humility and transparency. These words were like touchy-feely, foo-foo words 20 years ago. The smartest person in the room was the leader. But now the command and control leadership is over. People want to follow people that lead with this heart, lead with love, and they care deeply about making a difference in the world, not just putting money in their pockets.
Yeah, so it leads me to the thought of emotional intelligence versus IQ, right? We've all heard that. IQ is how much data you can process per second. Emotional is how much emotions you can process per second. And I have found in my experience, the best leaders, the best wealth management advisors, they're not of course they got to be intelligent, right? They got to be smart. They got to be able to talk about certain things, but at the same time, they have to emotionally be smart on how to deal with people's emotions, their goals, their dreams, right?
Yeah. I think the corporate America, the business world has been brainwashed that love is a word that should not be in the workplace. But if you go to the dictionary up here and you pull it off and said, look up the word love, it doesn't say not applicable Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
Right.
I believe that love belongs in the workplace. It might not be said. Like, I'm not going to call my customers and say, all of them, I love you, but you show your love. And that's what servant leadership is about. Through your actions, you're showing people you love them by putting them first and truly caring about them through your actions. Yeah. But really the heart-led leader.
So you talked 2 words you said I talk about a lot on this show, and as a father of 4 boys, it's something too that I like to talk about, but it's transparency and vulnerability. To your point, 20 years ago, heck, I would even argue 5 or 10 years ago, being transparent and being vulnerable was a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And I think those 2 words are so big now. Is the more transparent and vulnerable I can be with my wife, with my kids, right, with my clients, with our.
It's a sign of strength.
It's a sign of strength, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. And so when you hear that, what comes to mind when you hear the words transparency, vulnerability? How does that play out in your world with your team?
Yeah. Well, first of all, humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking about yourself less often. And transparency is really when you it's an authentic way of communicating. Authenticity and transparency are linked, because when you're transparent, when people say, well, how's your marriage doing? How are your kids? How's life doing? You know, those people that say, oh, my marriage is perfect. My kids are perfect. My job is perfect. Everything in life is perfect.
Right.
What do you say about that? That's bullshit.
Right.
There's no one that has a perfect life. Well, how's life? Well, I got a teenager daughter that's 14. One day, she loves when I take her to school and give her a big hug and a kiss, drop her off at school. The next, I drop her off at the same place, and she doesn't want to be seen with me because one of her friends are around. And she, like, you know, that's transparency. Like, okay, I have a 14-year-old daughter. I'm going through the same thing. Or marriage isn't, you know, easy. And when you're real, it breeds, like, vulnerability breeds trust. And the more you're vulnerable, the more trust is built, because you seem, you know, real and authentic. Yeah. And transparency and vulnerability are so linked. And Brett, you nailed it. These qualities were literally looked at as negative.
Yep.
You know,
negative and weak, right? Which a guy doesn't want to be looked at as weak. So it's usually
a leader has to know all the answers. You have to be strong. And now a leader getting up and saying, I don't have all the answers. And I'm afraid. And thank God I'm surrounded by wonderful people like you that are going to help me get through this. Yep. That's when people want to follow you and love you. There's a marriage book called Love and Respect. It's one of the marriages book that I
just did a Bible study on that in our office. We got 5 guys that do a Bible study every Wednesday, and it's amazing.
And my Bible study has done that book too. And basically, so your viewers know that book. It's basically about how marriages fail. And now 60-70% of marriages fail because really what the marriage is all about is love and respect. And a woman at the core, you know, DNA of who she is as a wife, she wants to feel loved. And the core of a man is they want to be respected. And a man is never truly going to love his wife until he feels respected. And a wife is never truly going to respect her man, her husband, until she feels loved. So it's this big cycle. When I read this book, I did think about my marriage, of course, but I thought about something else. I thought about leadership at work. Because I think, Brett, the same concept is at work. You can respect your leaders because that they're smart and they're articulate and they're successful and they helped you merge the incredible acquisition or merger. Or you can respect your leaders, but to love your leaders, that's only earned when a leader is vulnerable and really human. And I don't know, I think we've been brainwashed. We've been working so hard to earn the respect of our people. I don't care if my people respect me. I want my people to love me because they know I'm real and authentic and genuine. And when people love you, they give you their business, their friendship, their loyalty forever.
Yeah.
That's
it goes back to that net giving.
Net giving. Yeah.
I love that. I'm gonna steal that. I'll give you credit at least for a while until
you can steal it all you want, buddy.
That's good. Talk about the hard stuff though, right? We can get on here, the circuit of success. So we all want to talk about success, right? But talk about those times when it doesn't go successful in your world. Maybe the book doesn't get off to as fast a start as you want, or maybe you don't get that big gig that you think you're going to get from a leadership standpoint, or we don't get that big client, or whatever it is. People are listening, driving around, thinking about it. How do you battle through that, right? And think about the positive and still the love and all those things when maybe just quite frankly, you're pissed.
Yeah. I think God puts challenges in our lives to humble us and to bring us closer to him. But I look at my life in the last 3 years, to be totally transparent, I had a lot of hardship. My wife's ex-husband was very difficult to deal with. So difficult where we needed to get a restraining order, which is very painful because they have a son who's affected by that. I decided to diversify some revenue of my book sales, and I decided to get into a franchise and a successful one, Jersey Mike's, which I love.
Oh yeah.
And who doesn't like Jersey Mike sandwiches? And I met their founder and their COO, and I loved them as men, and said, I can do this. But I went up and lost $560,000 cash in 2 years, and it was devastating. And could have lost a lot more because I signed a 10-year lease and personally guaranteed it, and very, very humbling. And then I went into a business with a woman that I thought I trusted to teach heart-led leadership, like a curriculum, a 1-year program. And the program was fantastic, but our values weren't aligned. And when I tried to exit from the partnership, she got, evil and got a lawyer, and it, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to get her to drop the case. And it just, you get down.
Yeah.
It's so easy when you have ex-husbands and ex-business partners and, bad business deals. It can steal your joy and steal your belief in people. But you're always going to have obstacles. You're always going to have hardship. And I call this the 10% rule, the 10% critics and crazies. Like 10% of the people in the world think that Walt Disney is still alive. Like he's actually like frozen. You ever hear that? When they find his disease, they're going to thaw him out. Or 10% of the people in the world believe that, Hitler didn't kill all those Jews in Europe. Or 10% of the world believes that the United States never landed a lunar module on the planet of the moon in 1969. They staged it in Hollywood because we were trying to keep up with the arms race with Russia. And so they staged it. I mean, 10% of people in the world believe this stuff. And you're going to have 10% of critics in everything you do. I mean, my books are #1 bestsellers. They talk about love. They talk about servant leadership. They talk about authentic relationships. And you go on Google and there's people that think I'm Satan because I'm love.
Right.
So you're always going to have your critics and crazies. And the choice is yours. You want to live a life where you're listening to 10% of the critics and going with the 90% and changing the world with them? Or do you want to go with the 90% of the people and learn from your critics, but don't let them silence your heart? And so every obstacle, every loss, every bad client, every financial bad year, anyone there's listening, it humbles us, it makes us stronger. And I look back at my life and being dyslexic and struggling through school and struggling through college. It was the best thing for me.
Yep.
Watching my own 11-year-old son have learning disabilities. It's painful to see him go through that, but I know my son Tate is going to be so tenacious, because when you go through obstacles and you go through life without things being so easy for you, I think obstacles and challenges are blessings that really teach us to be humble and real.
No, you're absolutely right. And thank you for sharing all that. That's very, very transparent and very vulnerable. So very thankful for that, Tommy. I appreciate it. Talk to us about that. You mentioned though, and you kind of pointed to your chest for those that are watching, is you say you lost your joy, right? So talk to that man or woman right now that you just hit home to, and they're like, yep, I'm driving down the road. I have no joy. I lost my job. I have no money. Whatever, right? I have this ex-spouse that's crazy, whatever it may be. Talk to them. How do you get through that and actually find joy in the craziness? Because you're going to go through the craziness. You can't just eliminate it. So how do we find joy in that craziness?
Well, there's no perfect silver bullet answer. But, this past year, I lost $1 million with those 2 investments. And I went through a lawsuit with my, with the business partner, and, I had to get a restraining order all in 1 year. It was a shit ass year.
Right.
And, we were thinking about going on family vacation last year, and funds were a little tight, and we didn't have the money to go on a fancy vacation as we've done in the past. And so I went around the table, and my daughter said, let's go to Mexico and build homes for the poor. There's an organization, Homes for Hope. It's kind of like Habitat for Humanity with more of a faith-based twist, and it's just a different organization. Fantastic. And we went down to Mexico for 5 days, and we built a home for 3 of those days. And we literally went to the site of this dirt path, and they were living in a tent. And then my wife and I, with a few other couples, hand in hand with this mother and father and 3 young kids, built a home. And it humbled us, and it made us so grateful for everything we have. I take high school kids to Europe or to overseas, 40 or 50 of them every year, called the Global Youth Leadership Academy. And I'll never forget taking inner city kids to Ethiopia. These poor inner city kids that have, their joys knocked out of them because they don't have a dad or a mom. They have the money, and you take them to Ethiopia and you see the poverty and you see their heart change. So it's all about perspective. To answer your question is, no matter what pain you have, or, out of luck or health or whatever, you're alive. and you have the ability to make things right and to forgive and to find second chances and to overcome obstacles and to find that joy. We're really blessed to live in this country, the greatest country in the world. And no matter how many times you get knocked in the face and kicked in the teeth, we can always get back up and be better.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I think perspective, that's a huge word, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
there literally are billions of people. When you called your crap year, right? There's a billions of people that would have traded places with you.
Yeah.
Literally billions.
Yeah.
Which is nuts because you're like, no, you wouldn't. Not my year. You wouldn't have. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your habits and rituals. What's that no miss type of deal for Tommy Spaulding that, this has got to happen today, come hell or high water?
Yeah, well, the last few weeks I've been swimming every morning. That's something I love to do, is to take care of myself. And where I struggle is I love my wife and children. And when I'm home, I travel to a couple hundred cities a year. And so when you're home, you invest. And so I've kind of let myself go, and I kind of gained like 15 pounds and trying to get that back on track. But non-negotiables is I try to have, time every morning with my faith. I'm a Catholic, and if I can hit mass, go to mass, I love that. I love to write handwritten letters, and I have this little ritual where every week I buy a roll of stamps. That's 100 stamps, and I cut it in half. And the goal is to write 50 handwritten letters a week. And the way I kind of get myself excited about it is I grew up with nothing. I didn't have any money. My dad was a school teacher. And so when you grow up, with not a lot of wealth, throwing out stamps drives you crazy. So I have 50 stamps. By Friday at 5 o'clock, if I don't write all the letters, I throw out the stamps that I didn't use. You only have to do this a couple of times to start saying, I'm going to write these letters.
Right.
So literally every day for the last 20 years, I probably write, 5 to 10 handwritten notes a day. I've been doing this for 25 years.
Jeez.
To me, it's everything, because anyone can send a text or an email, but to write someone a note and tell them why you love them, why you respect them, what they did for you meant the world. It's a lost art. I mean, you go through your mail, you get all this junk mail and bills. When you get that handwritten letter, it's like
right. You're totally right.
I just think we just need to slow down and do things the right way. So I have these little notes, like just get some little note cards right here that have my name, and you write these little thing and put it in the mail. It doesn't have to be a long letter. You can write 10. I wrote these small cards because I can only write 2 or 3 sentences.
Right.
And half the words are misspelled because I'm dyslexic. But that's
it's okay.
Put it in the mail. People love them.
Right. No, you're right. Right behind me in this cabinet right here, I've got a wooden box that I keep every handwritten note. Right. Yeah. Every note. I don't go back and read them every day, but it's one of those things you need a little pick me up, or it's kind of nice to see that stuff. But you don't keep the text, do you?
Yeah.
You keep the handwritten note.
Yeah. Tony Dungy wrote a book called The Uncommon Life. And my stepson was home this weekend He's applying for the United States Air Force Academy.
Very cool.
On Saturday with the senator's office. And we're talking about, what it's like to live an uncommon life, where you write handwritten notes every day and you're following people up and you're volunteering and you're living what you preach, and you're making choices every day that are different. And I don't want to be like everyone else. Yep. I want to be different. I want to be unique. I want to live my life in such areas where people are affected and influenced in a different way. And if I may, that's really the topic of my next book is called 80,000. The next book I'm writing. It comes out February of 2021.
80 A-N-Y-1,000?
80.
80,000.
80,000.
80,000.
Book I'm writing on. I'm so obsessed with the topic of influence. When I heard this, I actually heard this from my good friend John Gordon years ago. There was some research done that the average human lives to about 78 years old around the world. The average human.
Yep.
And the research that was done years ago said that each person in the world influences, negatively or positively, 2.8 people a day when you go through your whole life. The person at Starbucks, to the bank teller, to your daughter, to your neighbor, to your employee, but 2.8 people a day we will rub off on, negatively or positively, in our life. Well, if you take 78 years times 2.8 people a day, it's exactly 80,000 people.
Wow.
So, lifetime, the average human will influence up to 80,000 people. When I heard this research, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And as a thought leader, I'm thinking about 80,000 people. That's a lot of people.
A lot of people.
Person, and negatively or positively. So if you gathered all those people that you've influenced in your life, all 80,000 at the end of our lives, where would they fit? In this, the United States, if you want to get 80,000 people in one place, where would they fit? They fit in a football stadium, like Lambeau Field or University of South Carolina or Notre Dame. These stadiums
Massive.
hold 80,000 people. And so the book is about what if at the end of our lives, like the last thing that we do before we go to heaven, that every human being on this planet goes to the 50-yard line at your closest football stadium. And we're standing on the 50-yard line by ourselves. And all 80,000 people, every person you've influenced in your life since you're a little toddler in the play box, your entire life, all 80,000 people, negatively or positively, are all in the stadium to say goodbye. And you're standing on the sidelines, looking at everyone, the 50-yard line, looking at everyone. And the question is, would they be cheering or would they be booing? Would they be chanting your name, you've changed my life, or would they be cursing your name because you screwed me over? And the whole book is about how do you live a life of positive influence where your stadium is filled with 80,000 fans thanking you for changing your life. So the book is 80,000. It's going to be published by Random House, Penguin Random House, comes out in February. And I just think that, leadership is so important, but I don't care how many people you've led or how many people you've managed, but you've never heard somebody say, man, Brett, I loved the way he led me.
Right.
No.
Don't say that.
He had a huge influence in my life. He changed my life. He had a huge impact on who I am today. And influence and impact are everything. It's the game changer. And so that's the path.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to read that. I mean, because the whole time you're talking, you could feel, and so people listen, I would ask you the question, could you feel this guy's passion, right? You could absolutely feel the passion about the influence. And not the influence, right, to manipulate something and get the sale, the influence to change somebody's life. And I was just at a Notre Dame game, my first one ever, just about a month ago, and it was a phenomenal experience. And just the tradition, the legacy, all that stuff. But having that stadium filled with somebody that I was in the sandbox with, right?
Yeah.
To the person that you impacted today that you don't even know that you impacted.
Yeah.
That's huge, man. So I'm going to ask you about, I saw on your Instagram page, your influencer, I hope I don't mess his name up, but Frank DeAngelis.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to us about Frank.
Yeah.
Tell us who Frank is first.
Well, Frank was the principal at Columbine High School for 20, 30 years. And he was at that school for nearly 40 years as a teacher before him. But he was the principal on April 21st, 1999, when two gunmen went into Columbine High School and shot and killed 12 people. And, unfortunately, there's been many, many school shootings since. And now Columbine is actually ranked number 12, the worst school shootings in our country. But
it was the first, right?
And that was the first. And he was the principal. And I didn't know Frank back then. But today, since I moved to Colorado, besides my father and my grandfather, and maybe another man named Jerry Middle, who's a financial advisor, by the way, no other man in my life has influenced me more than Frank DeAngelis, top 4 in my life. And I love him. He sends me a Bible verse and a text every morning telling me how much he loves me. And it's not one of those cut and paste bullshit things that, he sends to 10 people.
Right.
It's to me, Tommy. And he tells me he loves me and why he loves me every morning. He's done this for 6 or 7 years. When I'm home, I read the Bible verse to my wife, and I read him what Frank says, and I say, see, Frank told me he loved me. He was the first person who tells me to love me, not my wife, but Frank. But Frank was the principal at Columbine, and when Columbine happened, most principals would have quit. Most leaders would have given up. But he went back to that school weeks later and brought those students together, and he told them that we need to change the culture of that school. We need to bring love. We need to bring servant leadership, authentic relationships, heart-led leadership. We need to bring all this to our school because 2 students didn't feel loved. And he apologized. He owned it. He said, I'm the principal. This is my fault. Because 2 students didn't feel loved, this happened. And if I built a culture of love, this wouldn't have happened. And if you walk halls of Columbine High School today, 25 years later, today, 2,800 students in that school, Black, white, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Black, white, rich, poor, more merit scholars, more state championships in football and baseball, blue ribbon awards. I mean,
wow.
unprecedented success. The most gifted public school in the country, because the man dedicated his life after this tragedy, and he turned this tragedy into an incredible triumph of love because he was committed. Just one more caveat with Frank. A week after the tragedy, 2 weeks after the tragedy, no one knows. I wrote it in my book, The Heart of That Leader, but he didn't want to tell people he did this. But this is the humility of this man, Frank. 2 weeks after the tragedy, Frank DeAngelis visited the local elementary school in Littleton, Colorado, 3 miles down the road from Columbine. He went to the kindergartners and he said to them, I know, boys and girls, your moms and dad didn't tell you what happened in my school 2 weeks ago because you're kindergartners to protect your innocent ears. But I've come to ask you a favor. You see, we need to change the culture of Columbine. We need to bring love into our school. And not just Columbine, but our whole community. It starts right here in the kindergarten class. Will you help me bring love to our community? What do those little boys and girls do? They'll raise their hands.
Heck yeah.
Do. But then Frank DeAngelis said something to these kids that no leader would have ever said. He said, if you help me bring love to our community, help me change the culture of my school, of our school, I will stay principal until you boys and girls graduate.
Oh, God, I got chills, man.
And the day you boys and girls graduate Columbine High School, I'll retire. So a few years ago, those kindergartners graduated Columbine High School. I actually got to speak to the whole senior class. I got to meet them. And
wow.
Frank literally retired the day after those boys and girls graduated. That's commitment.
That's a hell of a story, man. That is commitment.
Everyone listening, we have to find something in our life that we are just committed to. I'm committed to changing the hearts of leaders, to really have them seeing that it's not about them. When you're leading people, it's about loving and serving the people that choose to follow you. That's my mission.
Yep.
What's your mission? What are you committed to? What's your Frank project? Frank DeAngelis changed my life. And there's not a day that goes by he doesn't tell me he loves me. And I'm really glad that I got to meet this incredible man. So humble and so genuine.
Unbelievable.
Thanks for asking about him, Brett.
Well, thanks for sharing, man. There's a million questions there, but you think about that as a leader, that is the definition of personal responsibility, isn't it? He could have easily blamed all sorts of stuff or walked, and this wasn't my deal. This was something somewhere else. But think of the responsibility, man, to go to a class, I have a kindergartner, so that's probably why it was like emotional hearing you say that, like thinking about my little guy being the one responsible for this O'Fallon High School right over here. And he's years away from there, right? Man, that's amazing. Amazing. Which sounds like we need to get Frank on the Circuit of Success podcast.
I'd love to make that happen.
Yeah, I would too.
That when I hang on.
All right. Well, man, that was phenomenal. So thank you so much for sharing that. What would you tell yourself looking back at your Jersey subs, your other business thing, and even stuff that maybe happened 5 and 10 years ago? What would you tell the Tommy Spaulding of 10 or 15 years ago? What advice would you give that guy?
Even when you get kicked in the teeth, even when, life throws you some lemons, don't lose the joy. I'm not telling you the whole true story, but when all that happened to me the last few years, Tommy Spaulding, the author of these books about love and leadership and positive influence, went through some deep depression and really kind of gave up joy on people because my wife wanted to hurt me in a way that I couldn't comprehend. My ex-business partner didn't want to just settle it. She wanted to hurt me and really bring me through the mud. And, exiting out of the Jersey Mike's thing was not a fun process. And I got to see some true colors of some pretty tough people. And I really started questioning people and people's motives. And, I had a cousin that, that I loved, that was in town with his wife and his in-laws and wanted to come over for dinner. And it was what, when you travel to 23 cities a month, 24, 25 cities a month, you only have 4 or 5 days a month you get to really spend with your family. And it was one of those days I was on the road, crazy, and I was home and told my cousin, it's just not a good time. I really got to be home with my kids. And he just sent me an email that I was like basically a terrible human being because I wouldn't see him. And, you can have things in life where you have to make decisions that you think was right for your family and yourself, and people are going to let you down and hurt you. And what I would tell myself 10, 15, 20 years ago is don't give up. They're just part of those 10% of people that are those critics and crazies, and focus on the 90% of people that want to do life with you in a good, healthy, beautiful way. Because the world is always filled with critics. No matter what good you want to do in the world, people are going to try to bring you down. And you got to focus on the positives and don't focus on the negative people, because we all have them in our lives.
Well, that's great. That is phenomenal as well. Deep thinking with Tommy Spaulding here today, man. I love it. So how many of the fears you've put in your mind, Tommy, over the years have actually blown up to the magnitude you put them in your mind to be?
Yeah. If I could tell you why, ask me why I started Jersey Mike's.
Why'd you start Jersey Mike's, Tommy?
And here's why. It's a $560,000 lesson.
Yep.
And it's actually a beautiful lesson.
It's a big lesson.
I did it because I had fear. You see, 2 #1 best-selling books. It's very hard to have 3. And when you're on the speaking circuit, you meet all the famous authors, all the great thought leaders, and they all tell you the same thing. Tommy, there's a bell-shaped curve, and you're going to have this success, and your sex is going to go up, and then it's going to go down. And you've now been on the circuit for 11 years with 2 best-selling books, and maybe your 3rd book won't do as well. And maybe you start diversifying your income, and just in case you're not as successful, and you start getting self-doubt. Will my 3rd book be successful like the first 2? And will people still want to hire me? And will I still be relevant? And you start self-doubting, as we all do. And so I said, well, shit, I'll just start selling cheesesteak sandwiches.
Exactly.
As a backup plan. If I own 10 Jersey Mike's and make $1 million a year selling sandwiches, that'll be my backup plan if my books don't sell. That's why I started it, because I had fear. I let in my head, and we all have fear. We all start doing things in our lives to overcompensate this fear. I should know that my 3rd book is going to be just as successful as my first 2, because I had to believe in myself. And I started not believing myself and started listening to the critics out there. And so don't open a franchise because you're afraid of what your God-given talent's going to be.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing in life, follow your passion and work hard at it, and the money will come.
Well, I think too, when you just said that right there, is I have no doubt, Tommy, that your 3rd book, like literally no doubt that your 3rd book will be your most successful book yet. Like that's what my intuition tells me. It's what my gut's telling me. I mean, when you talk about 80,000 hours, when you watch this back, if you choose to, you're going to see the passion on your face that was different than the other, 53 minutes and 4 seconds that we've been talking.
Thank you.
So you're going to crush it. You're going to absolutely crush it.
Yeah.
I had what I thought was going to be a great. Last question for you. So if I could eliminate the restraint of time and I could eliminate the restraints of money, what impact are you making? What are you doing?
I work with high school kids. That's really where my heart's at. I do the speaking and the book writing for corporate America, and it's my talent. But where my heart is teaching high school kids to know how to love themselves so they can love others. And what I really figured out after 20 years of running, I started a program called the National Leadership Academy. It's a high school leadership program where we have hundreds of high school kids that come to Denver every June. And then we have another program called the Global Youth Leadership Academy, where we take kids abroad. This year, we're taking 48 kids to Norway and 30 kids to Costa Rica. And we take kids all over working with high school kids. And I have a high school kid. And I learned that a lot of high school kids still haven't figured out their self-confidence, who they are,
right,
of themselves. And so now that I'm coaching Fortune 500 CEOs, I realize I'm doing the same thing. Is the CEOs that are leading organizations, that are narcissists, that are selfish, that need all the limelight, all the credit, the corner office, that aren't servant leaders. The reason why they're that way, they didn't learn in high school how to truly love themselves. And so after 25 years of leadership development, as a teacher, as a student, here's what I've learned, Brad. It boils down to this. You can't love and serve other people until you know how to love yourself. And I'm not talking about self-love like egotistical love, but
right.
who you are. Because not, you're going to take the limelight, you're going to take the credit. You can't be a servant leader. You can't live a life where putting others first is natural. And so I learned this stuff when I was 40, 45, 50. Imagine teaching this stuff to a 16-year-old kid.
Oh, it's a game changer.
It's life changer. And so if I do my job right, and I change every high school kid's life, I wouldn't have a job teaching company CEOs how to lead differently because they would have learned it in high school.
Well, that might be just as successful as your book because you were pretty damn passionate right there too. So, and I lied to you and I said that was my last question. It's not. Couple more here. When I say the words reading and think time, how important are those two things for leaders, just people in general, right? We're all leaders at whatever level you're at. You're a leader of your own life. How important is thinking and reading?
Well, you mentioned Matthew Kelly, who's a dear friend of mine and yours. He's one of the greatest authors of all time.
Yep.
Somebody I admire, and who's the real deal, by the way. We were talking. We were in Florida together, and we were having coffee. And
Singer Island.
Singer Island, yeah.
I've been there with him.
That's where I want to retire. Yeah. Buy a place down there, and hopefully next year.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're talking about white space. I was telling Matthew, we don't have enough white space where it's just time to really sit. And when I was in Singer Island, walking the beaches and going for walks, really thinking, we move 1,000 miles an hour. This morning, got up at 5 a.m, dropped my kid off at hockey, went for a swim, got to the office for 8 o'clock staff meeting, and this, and this, and this, and this, move 1,000 miles an hour. Where do you think? Where do you dream? Where do you strategically think about what's next? And we need to pause and have white space. And for me, as being dyslexic, I read books on tape, but you're only smart as the last book you've read. Reading books and reading the paper and knowing knowledge about politics and business and sports and international relations. And we are constantly too busy to learn. And we got to find time to read. Yep. You got to find time to write handwritten notes. And you got to find time to be with yourself, be alone and think and ask yourself, how can I change the world better today?
I love it. Tommy Spaulding, where do our listeners find more of you, man? Where can we find you?
Oh, I hate self-promoting, but okay. It's my website.
I want to make you.
It's TommySpaulding.com. That's SPAULDING.com.
Awesome. TommySpaulding.com. He's also on Instagram. You're a good follow on Instagram. I think we follow each other on there. I know I follow you. So good stuff. Yeah. Man, it has been a pleasure having you. And we'll tell Matthew the other one said hello. And just appreciate you being here. Let's make Frank happen on the Circuit of Success too. Let's get him on.
I'll put that together. Send me an email and I'll connect you guys.
All right, man. You're the man. Thanks so much for being here.
Take care. Thanks so much.